Hey all, DL White here. Before I run the recording of this last section of Second Time Around, I want to warn you that from this point on it's pretty steamy. And one time I was listening to an audiobook of a romance novel, and you know how y'all be writing that filth. I was in the drive through at McDonald's, and the clerk heard things she probably should not hear over the speaker. And so I want to save you from that embarrassment by letting you know that you should probably listen to this section with your earbuds in, or your headphones on, or alone in a room not around your children or your mother. Welcome back to the Bookcast. This is DL White, and we are reading Second Time Around, A Powder Lake Holiday Short. Chapter 6. Bennett. Bennett hadn't seen Sage in days. That had been on purpose. He wasn't sure what he'd said to turn her off, or that he'd said anything to turn her off for that matter. She had mentioned keeping to herself for a while, though, and he wanted to give her the space she needed. But he missed her. He knew it was odd to miss someone he had just met, had no real relationship with, and had turned tail and run away from him as soon as the opportunity to get close had arisen. But he missed her. Give her a few days, Monroe had advised. She's probably gun-shy, you know. She said it had been a while. You're in the same boat, so you understand, I'm sure. Yeah, he answered. I get that. So, I'll give it time. But now he was sitting in the parking lot outside of Rooster's, watching her patrons walk in, heads down against the gusty winds that had blown in over the past few days, then walk out with smiles and tall cups of Rooster's brew. He fought with himself, trying to decide if he should go in or drive away like he'd done every time he pulled into the parking lot without seeing her or speaking to her. Today, he had to go in. He was anxious to see her, say hello to her. Besides, he had an hour before his next service call, and he could use a cup of coffee. Before he could change his mind, he turned the key in the ignition and popped the latch on the driver's side door. He stepped out of the truck, slid his key ring into his front pocket, and walked across the parking lot. At the door to the shop, he paused. Sage and an employee were at the front counter. A few tables were occupied, but there was no one at the front counter. He couldn't hear the conversation, but Sage and the employees were having what seemed to be a spirited, laugh-filled conversation, full of hand gestures and sassy neck rolls. He stepped inside the shop, at once enveloped by warmth and the scent of roasted coffee. Whatever conversation Sage was having, it died as soon as he stepped in. She stood stock still, her eyes wide, but a hint of a smile on her lips. At least she didn't frown. Maybe she was happy to see him. Her employee smiled and centered herself at the counter. Welcome to Roosters. What can I pour for you? She chirped. Bennett smiled at her and approached the counter. Though he'd rather order from Sage, he wouldn't be so rude as to demand it. Cup of coffee, please. Dark roast, large. Sure thing. Would you like a sugar cookie or two? Mare's mama-in-law made 'em fresh this morning. He shook his head, digging out his wallet and pulling out a crisp bill. Can't handle the sugar. Thanks, though. He slid the bill across the counter. She rang up the order and gave him his change. Sage grabbed a cup and poured his coffee, then tipped her head toward the end of the counter. Bennett slid the change into his pocket and gave the clerk a smile and a nod, then met Sage a few steps away. Hey there, he lobbed quietly, while adding cream and sugar substitute to his coffee, then stirring it until it lightened to a tempting, lovely dark beige color. Good to see you. Good to see you, too, she said, leaning onto the counter, her hands clasped together. She wore her standard Roosters t-shirt and jeans, but her hair seemed to be silkier, bouncier, and shorter. It had an extra flair to it. You're staring at my hair. You like it? I had Yvonne over at Curl and Dye give me a cut and a nice press and curl. She said she hates doing press and curls. I told her not to be so good at it because that's all I'm ever going to ask her to do. It looks nice on you. I like it a lot. So, he gulped his coffee, then regretted doing that because it was still quite hot. How have you been? I've been fine, Bennett. And you? Haven't seen you around for a few days. Thought you'd forgotten about me. I'm good. You did say you were going to keep to yourself for a while. Was trying to respect that. Was I supposed to ignore that? I guess not. Her gaze dropped to the counter, making her eyelashes sweep against chiseled high cheekbones. Then her eyes flicked up to his. I was going to call you to talk, but I had no way to reach you. Oh! He reached into his pocket to pull out his wallet again and slipped a card out from the thin stack he kept there. Now you have my card. That's my mobile number. Call any time. She took the card and stared at it like it held military secrets, then tucked it into the pocket of her jeans. So, I can take a break if you want? I mean, I'd like to talk to you if you want to. Want to? He laughed, almost too loudly. Woman, you haven't seen me sitting outside this place every day, wondering if I should come in here. Hell yeah, I want to. I'll go find a seat. Sage. For the second time that week, Bennett surprised her. After she had that emotional tantrum at Helen's and stomped out, she wouldn't have been surprised if he'd never seen him again. I was a fool, Ray, she ranted that night. After dinner, they took a walk around the west end of town to look at the Christmas displays and exercise off a little bit of that three-helping dinner. Just acting stupid. He probably thinks I'm crazy. He doesn't think you're crazy, Mom. How do you know? You wouldn't even meet him, you stuck-up self. I didn't meet him because he's new to your life, and he shouldn't be meeting your children this early. Ray gave Sage an impatient glare, then hooked her arm around her mother's and picked up the pace of their steps. Anyway, I'm sure he doesn't think you're crazy. Just call him and explain that this is a big move for you, and I can't call him. I don't have his number. I only have the number to Breville, and I'm not calling them to get his number. I just have to wait to see him, and believe me, this is a small town, but if you want to avoid someone, you can. She remembered a long, hilarious conversation with Leslie Baker Kavanaugh over mocha fraps on a rainy Sunday evening. She'd talked about knowing that Cade had moved back to Potter Lake and successfully avoiding him for over a year because she knew that the second she saw him, that she'd fall right back in love with him, and that was the last thing she wanted. Or so she thought. In less than a year, they'd moved in together, were married and pregnant, and making everyone absolutely sick with their sweet love story. Truth be told, Sage had held to that story ever since. Gordon was the love of her life, but who said you couldn't have more than one? Her next love was waiting. She was sure of it. Mom, Ray drawled, leading her back to the car. They'd made a full loop and were reasonably tired enough to go back home and resume their holiday movie watching before Ray returned to her apartment the next day. He doesn't think you're crazy. You did say you needed some time or whatever, so if he gives it to you, take it, but... She paused at the passenger side door, then grabbed Sage's hands and squeezed them. I may not have met him, but I watched him watching you. I've seen that look on a man's face before. Daddy had it. There's no way he can resist you, so you just keep being Sage Owens, and he'll come around. And here he was, all 6 feet and then some, big shoulders, wide chest, friendly smile, and deep, sexy laugh of him. Here he was. And Sage couldn't think of a single thing to say. So, how much coffee do you drink in a day? He asked. She settled into the booth across from him, her own cup of coffee in front of her. Depends on the day and the season. In the summer, I drink a lot of iced coffee, iced tea. In the winter, I drink more hot tea than coffee, but some days just call for coffee. I try to balance it with water. Silence befell them both. Sage sipped, and Bennett sipped, but neither seemed bothered by the quiet. So, since you fix all manner of electronic things, do you find that you collect them? You've been talking to Virginia? I used to have a warehouse full of stuff, and she'd bug me all the time about my junk. Can't figure out how to fix it if you never broke it, especially the vintage stuff, but then it became cheaper to buy an updated model than to repair the old one, so people stopped bringing a lot of those items in. I had to cull my collection when I sold the house. I still have a fair number of things in storage back in Charlotte. Once I get into another house, I'll find a way to display some things I just like having. Sage nodded. She loved to hear him talk, the way the bass in his voice almost made the table rumble, but also that he wasn't a gruff, loud man. There was a lot to like about Bennett Alexander. I wanted to apologize, Sage blurted. Bennett's brows met, his forehead wrinkling in apparent confusion. I. The other night, I was having sort of a. She huffed, nearly out of breath for no real reason except that the words she wanted to say wouldn't come. Maybe this wasn't the right time. In the middle of their workday, with customers halfway listening and the time clock ticking, a wonderful idea crossed her mind. You know what? I'd like to have you for dinner. Over. For dinner, she corrected, giggling. Bennett laughed. Let me try that again. Would you like to come to dinner tonight? My place, nothing special, but I'd love to be able to relax and talk. Alone. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to be dinner. See, there you go, getting fresh with me. You started it. After a moment, he gave her a single head nod. I'll bring the wine. Sage bumbled around her apartment, fluffing pillows and adjusting curtains in between checking on the pot on the two-burner stove. It was much less of a kitchen than she was used to, but she was learning to make it work. The vegetables were in a double boiler on the stove, but the Instant Pot she'd recently purchased had the chicken and wild rice ready in a flash. By the time 3 loud, strong knocks sounded at the door, she was a bag of nerves. A pretty bag, though, in a thigh-length, deep V scalloped neck bodycon dress that clung where appropriate and had a split up the leg that left nothing to the imagination. She finished off the look with a pair of slippers, but they were her good ones, the fluffy black pair with the faux fur. When she opened the door to let Bennett in, Sage was nearly bowled over, first by the very scent of him, a subtle, minty green tea flower scent that was light but suited him, and then the fitted t-shirt, jeans, and dark sneakers that he'd traded for his daily uniform. Hi, she finally uttered, after staring for longer than a few seconds. She stepped back so he could enter the apartment, amused that he had to duck to get inside. Hi yourself, he said, handing her a bottle that he fisted by the neck. He made no secret of the fact that he was taking her in head to toe, and she was enjoying it. He handed her the bottle, saying, I wasn't sure what we were having, but this is a favorite. A Sauvignon Blanc, great choice. She took his jacket and hung it in the hall closet. Well, this is pretty much it, she said, waving her arm around the living room. From the front door, the kitchen, the dining room, and the living room were visible. Back there, around the corner, kind of, is my bedroom and the bathroom, if you need it. This is a cute place, he mused, nodding and looking around. Good construction? Just enough. I like it. Though, like you, I have a collection of things in storage back in Ocala waiting to need a place big enough to put them somewhere. Maybe when Ray's out of school, but she's talking about moving to LA or New York when she graduates. She'd been talking while she worked, dishing up plates of chicken and rice, adding a few spears of steamed broccolini and a roll to the side. We can eat in the living room. Make yourself comfortable. They sat on the couch, side by side, plates perched on their knees, and ate, talked, and laughed through Best Man Holiday. You know how I know Terrence Howard is a good actor? Sage asked as the credits rolled. She picked up Bennett's plate and carted it to the kitchen with her own. You can't hardly stand the dude, but you have to see every movie he's in. Exactly, Sage squealed, pointing at Bennett, who made himself comfortable, stretching an arm along the back of the couch, removing his shoes, and crossing his socked feet under the coffee table. That's exactly it. I wouldn't share air with that man, but he sure knows how to bring a character to life. Maybe we heap our feelings about the character he portrays onto the man. I don't think so. He's an ass. Bennett laughed, which made Sage laugh too. Hey, you want some ice cream? It's that no sugar added stuff. I heard you at the shop when you said you couldn't handle the sugar in cookies. Yeah, a scoop will do me. Sage brought 2 small bowls, each holding a scoop of vanilla bean ice cream to the couch. She sat next to Bennett, but closer than she'd sat for dinner. Do you have diabetes? Nope, he replied, licking the cold cream off of his spoon. Just old. Ever since about 40, I can't hold my liquor, and sugar gives me all kinds of problems. Sage chuckled, scraping the bowl with the edge of her spoon. You aren't old. The kids say seasoned. I like that. That sounds good. Seasoned, then. He finished off the bowl and set it on the table. Sages joined him a few moments later. When she moved to get up to take them to the kitchen, he landed a hand on the smooth, dark skin of her thigh, exposed by the split in her dress. Don't get up yet, he encouraged, his voice just above a whisper. Relax. You said you wanted to talk earlier. What about? Oh, Sage tugged at the dress to pull it down some. It had ridden high up on her hips, and her whole leg was hanging out of it. But then, in a moment of sheer determination to step outside of herself and do things she wouldn't normally do, she left it and laid a hand on top of Bennett's. He turned his hand over, palm up. She slid her palm across his and let him close his big hand around hers. A shiver coursed through her, though she wasn't cold, just aware. Aware that she was in her apartment, alone with Bennett Alexander, a man who had occupied her thoughts since the moment she saw him. The other night. She shook her head. I guess I was too deep inside my own head. Day to day, I don't know what's happening. Some days I still feel married, like I could roll over and he should still be right there. Some days I know he's gone. I feel so empty and so lonely. I get that way around the holidays. Then Ray and I fought over whether or not I was trying to replace her father, and I thought I was fine, but those words kept circling in my head like buzzards, like a record on repeat. I mean, she shifted, moving so she faced him, could see him more easily. Bennett, I like you, and I know we don't know each other, but I like what I know, and I'm seasoned too, so I'm no dummy. I know that feeling is mutual, and I got scared. Really scared, terrified even. Of what, though? It's not like I proposed or anything. That's exactly what I told Ray, Sage answered, laughing. But then, I guess I didn't listen to myself. I got hung up on missing Gordon and wanting someone to be with, and I felt like it wouldn't be fair to you if that's all it was. Sage, listen. If something pops off between us, I'm all good about it. If all it ever is some fun between you and me, it's worth it. I miss sex and kissing and having somebody to hold on to, somebody to give tight hugs to, somebody to take to dinner, to spend time with. Am I trying to replace my wife? Not in so many words. But it's not unrealistic to think that that's what's happening. Sure. And I don't know about you, but I'm dealing with a lot of guilt over that. But I like you more than I feel guilty about liking you. I want to spend time with you more than I feel guilty about wanting to spend time with someone new. Sage nodded, understanding his dilemma completely because she was in the same spot herself. I feel better knowing I'm not alone here. Good. You know what would make me feel better? Sage smiled, knowing what was coming, but asked anyway. What would make you feel better, Bennett? Bennett leaned over until his lips were so close to hers she could feel his breath on her skin. She closed the distance, tipping her head up so her lips pressed into his in a soft, gentle kiss. He pulled back, then went in again, this time with parted lips and a breathy sigh, capturing her tongue as it flicked out to meet his. Sage sucked in a long breath through her nose, then heard the pleasured moan before realizing it was actually her. Bennett chuckled mid-kiss, then hummed before moving in closer and deepening the kiss. Before Sage realized it, she was on her back. Bennett hovered, dusting her skin with his lips from her chin to her neck, down her chest, tracing the path of the scalloped neck, down one side and back up. He tasted the glowing skin of her breasts, lingering there for the most amazing few minutes of her life recently. Oh, God, Bennett. He hummed, but didn't stop. He kept exploring until his teeth found the tight pearl of her nipple through the dress and her thin, lacy bra. He nipped it, lightly, over and over. With each nip, a spark shot through Sage, pushing out a whimper that grew in volume until she couldn't take one more second of teasing. She gripped the collar of the dress and pulled it back to reveal the simple black lace bra, then freed herself from the bra, and without even thinking about how she should be demure and tease him and not give in too easily or too early, she grabbed Bennett's chin and pulled him down to her, guiding his warm mouth and wet tongue to close over the bud and rasp over her nipple over and over and over. Familiar waves of arousal washed over her, making her drunk and heady with desire, with want. She wanted Bennett in every way possible. He had relaxed, settling between her thighs, moaning as he licked and sucked, circling first one nipple, then, after freeing the other, doing the same. She was pulsing, head to toe, but especially at her core. Her body began to buck and writhe under his, and when his hips hunched into hers, she yelped at feeling the thick, hard lump. "Bennett!" she gasped, pushing up onto her elbows. "Wait!" Chapter 7. Bennett. Bennett was as surprised as he imagined she was to find himself laying on top of her, her skin marked with evidence of his enjoyment. When she began to sit up, uttering a strangled cry, he panicked. He lifted his head, freezing all motion. "Do you need to stop? What's wrong?" Sage pushed against his shoulder, forcing him up. "I don't want to stop. I don't have plans to anyway, but if you do, we need to be upright on opposite ends of the couch because..." She shook her head slowly, a grin creeping across her lips. "Like I said, it's been 6 years. I'm way past ready." Relieved, Bennett sat up. "I'm right there with you. But I don't want you to think I planned on this, or that I expected it." "But I did," Sage replied. She swung her legs from the couch and stood, grabbing his hand and pulling him up. "Come on, let's get where we can relax." Sage's bedroom was... small could be a word. Miniature would be a better fit. The bed was a full size because that's all that would fit in the room. A 5-drawer chest stood against one wall, and the other was, Bennett assumed, a closet, the kind with the doors that slid to one side or the other. He guessed, as well, that the closed door led to the bathroom. What the room lacked in size, it made up for in character and decoration with a purple-pink theme. Blown glass vases with silk flowers bearing all shades of purple and lavender, photo frames in deep eggplant and bright fuchsia, and matching bedspread and curtains in royal purple with gold pinstripe woven through it. "It's not much to look at," she started to say, but Bennett stopped her, pausing her with a finger to her lips. Then he replaced his finger with his own lips and kissed her. When she pulled back, he was cradling her face in his palms. "I have no complaints about this room. It's very... you." He kissed her again and stepped back. "Where do you want me?" Bennett thought he heard her say, "all over me," but he wasn't sure. It was muffled by Sage pulling her dress up and over her head. She tossed it to the corner nearest the closet and disposed of the wispy black lace bra the same way. He began to pull his t-shirt up, but Sage cried out for him to stop. "You're opening my present, man. What's wrong with you?" A sultry laugh rolled from her throat as she tugged on the hem of his shirt and slowly slid it up, revealing a taut belly and molded chest. He wasn't a cover model with a six-pack and pectorals that danced all by themselves. He'd kept his shape up pretty well over the years. "Okay, this can come off. Arms up." He lifted his arms and grabbed the shirt to help her pull it off. "Put it anywhere. You won't need it for a while." Then she reached for the band of his jeans, nimble fingers loosening his belt and then the top button and slowly tugging down the zipper. So slowly, he thought he might lose his mind, or at least wave her fingers away and rip the zipper down himself. He pushed his jeans down his thighs. He kicked first one leg and then the other, until they pulled at his ankles. He stepped out of them, then used his foot to push them behind him, where he dropped his shirt. Now he stood in her bedroom, in his briefs. "Come sit," she said, directing him to the edge of the bed. As soon as he sat, Sage climbed onto him, straddling him, and sitting on his lap. His hands cupped her fully exposed breasts. Her nipples were hard, seemingly aching for his fingers or his mouth. She moved abreast towards him and fed a nipple into his mouth. He sucked on it greedily as she moaned softly, her hips beginning to grind against him. As he sucked one breast, he fondled the other, flicking the nipple, causing peals of pleasured sounds and more forceful writhing. He switched from one to the other, making sure they both got the action they deserved. In a swift move, Sage pushed his shoulders so he was laying back on the bed. To match her sudden moves, Bennett grabbed her by the waist and pulled her down, rolling on top of her. I think we're still both overdressed. Don't have to tell me twice. Sage bucked her hips up so she could pull the thin boy shorts down her legs. Bennett did the same, writhing out of his briefs, then sinking back into place. Sage was warm and soft, but solid beneath him. She liked this, feeling her skin to skin and sensing the heat that was coming from her body. He liked this, feeling her skin to skin and sensing the heat that was coming from her body. He rolled to his side, then reached out to smooth a hand down her thigh, then back up the inside toward the warmth. Sage's legs opened a little wider to make room for his exploration. The first touch was light, barely there. Sage gasped and tensed, and when Bennett pulled back, she reached down to lay a hand over his. Don't stop. I'm just... The anticipation. Bennett could understand that full well. He was almost, but not quite painfully erect and anticipated some reciprocal touching and stroking. But first he wanted Sage to be comfortable with him. So he took his time, rubbing and teasing her, in awe of how wet he could make her by touching and kissing her. They were both a sweaty, panting mess, but the feeling of being intimate again was so intoxicating, he didn't dare stop. When Sage reached for him, wrapping her hand around him and beginning to stroke him, he thought his eyes might roll back in his head. It had been 5 years, 9 months, and 24 days to be exact, since anyone else had touched him. He released a loud grunt into the air, and his hips bucked with the rhythm of her movements. Sage, It's been a long time. I might not. Shh, she hissed, cutting him off with a kiss. She gripped his shoulders and then pulled him so he was between her legs again. His body was sending out signals like Morse code, searching for her heat, her warmth, something to sink into. Once again, she gripped him, but this time, it was to guide him to her. I'm ready if you are. I want all of you, Bennett. Please. That whimper, that tone of pleading in her voice did him in. He positioned himself and pushed into her, almost filling her with a single stroke. He pulled back and plunged again, and again, and, oh God, again and again and again. Sage. Yes, fuck me, Bennett. Shit. Did that actually come out of her mouth instead of only in her head? She suspected so, because Bennett chuckled, then grabbed her legs, hooking his arms behind her knees so she was wide open. He hovered above her, bucking his hips, using his whole body to bring her the most pleasure she'd experienced in, well, ever. Gordon was a perfect lover, but that was just it. He was neat and tidy, liked to tick off boxes. Licking, check. Sucking, check. Petting, check. The old thrust, thrust, thrust move to the slow grind, back to the thrust, thrust, thrust until he brought it home. Check. For 23 years, that was how it had been. And since she'd never been with anyone with Gordon, she thought that was how it was supposed to be. Until Gordon died, and one of her friends gave her a pornographic movie as a gag gift, and when she finally got up the nerve to watch it, she became curious about how other men made love, had sex, did the do. Bennett was satisfying every curiosity and then some. He liked to vary in length and depth. He liked to pepper her with kisses in between strong, satisfying strokes. And the sounds he made, she gushed at the thought. You good? He asked, his face mere inches from hers. She stretched up to capture his lips, starting a dance with his tongue that she felt in the pit of her belly, which made her grind into him harder, meeting him plunge for plunge. I'm real good right now, Bennett. Don't stop. Don't ever stop. Gotta stop sometime, baby girl. I promise you'll be worn out when we do, though. At that moment, to her surprise, Bennett pulled out. She started to sit up, propped up on her elbows. What hap— Oh. She fell back again at the sensation of his tongue rasping over her clit, then taking it into his mouth to suck on it, then more nipping and licking until she was climbing the walls, grunting and yelping in indescribable pleasure. This, this was something Gordon rarely did for her. Maybe on special occasions he would venture south, but not often. She'd never known any different, but now that she had, holy fuck. She clung to his head, holding him between her thighs while she writhed against him. Then it was so much, too much. Her climax hit hard and loud. She ground against his mouth, eking out every bit of her first orgasm that wasn't self-induced in years. That was amazing to watch, said Bennett, kissing his way back up her body. You're beautiful when you come. Ready for more? Hell yeah. Oh, God, she answered right before he entered her again, picking up his long, hard, pounding strokes. Fucking shit, I'm gonna come again. Do that shit, he said, exertion showing on his face. I'll go when you go. Sage found that sexy. And not just sexy, but sensual. He was getting off by watching her get off. And get off she was. She wrapped her arms around his torso and bucked her hips into him, grinding her clit on his pubic bone. The most delicious sounds and parts of words and phrases were uttered through clenched teeth grunted into her ear. Bennett worked with the strength of 10 men. Sage was deliriously on edge, and then fell over the cliff of a body-stiffening, convulsive, explosive orgasm, apparently taking Bennett with her from the loud grunts and the shit, 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 shit he grunted into the air. Then he collapsed as if his legs had given out. He heaved breaths, sucking in air, his body coated in sweat. In a few minutes, it seemed, he gathered the strength to lift his head, find her lips, and kiss her. Not a wild, passionate kiss, but an acknowledgement of what they'd just shared. Sage reached for a pillow from the head of the bed and tucked it under her neck. That was so incredible. Yeah, Bennett said. His voice was raspy, like his throat was dry. And to think, that was only the first time when you run into all the snags and kinks. Next time, it will be better. Sage paused. Next time. Bennett's head lifted from his resting place on her chest, between her breasts. You're gonna give me one taste of Sage Owens and then cut me off. I wouldn't dream of doing that to you, she said, with a giggle. I was hoping it wasn't weird for you. Bennett paused, as if to contemplate that. I don't think weird is the word, just different. How about you? Sage nodded, mentally listing the ways that Bennett rocked her world. Different, yeah. And I welcome different any day that ends in Y and twice on Sunday. Bennett laughed, then with great effort rolled to the right and sat up. You're not leaving yet, are you? He glanced back at her, where she was splayed out on the bed in post-coitus delirium. You want me to stay? A few minutes and a bottle of water, and I could be in the mood for more of that different you're offering. Chapter 8. Sage. Whatever you did with her hair last time, she wants that again. Ray, the director of not only Sage's life but everyone else's, chatted with Yvonne at the curl and dye at her chair. Tamara refreshed her twists while Sage's hair had been washed. Now Yvonne was gently rubbing a towel over her head. Yvonne laughed, then got to work on what had become Sage's signature hairdo, a flirty, bouncy bob with a side bang. Ray, how's school going? Yvonne laughed, then got to work on what had become Sage's signature hairdo, a flirty, bouncy bob with a side bang. Ray, how's school going for you over at Healy this year? And you know I'm not talking about your classes. Your mom keeps me up on all of that. I'm looking for the good. She's not going to tell you nothing with her mama sitting right here, Tamara called from her chair. I don't have any secrets from my mom, said Ray, dropping into the empty salon chair next to Tamara's section. Leslie spent 3 days a week at City Hall, helping her husband run Potter Lake. The other days, she was at her station at the Curl and Dye. Today she was downtown, making sure the annual New Year's Eve fireworks show and block party went off without a hitch. Sage had been put in charge of coffee and hot chocolate, so she'd come in early for her hair appointment. Well, spill the juice then, said Yvonne, pumping cream into her hands and slowly working it through Sage's hair. My classes are good, they're all really fun this semester, but I know you're looking for information on my new boyfriend. With dramatic flair, Ray stood and paced the shop, regaling the two stylists and the only other customer with details, sordid, raunchy, extensive details about the biology major she had been seeing for the past few months. The young man had apparently made an impression on Ray. In the mirror, Sage watched Yvonne's facial expressions change with every revelation. You can say all of that with your mom in the room. I have heard it all and much more, Sage offered, frowning. At least she's telling someone else for a change. Every text, every look, every love note, if he farts in her direction, I get a phone call. I can't talk about my man, but I have to hear about hers every day. I'm tired, and I'm not even in this relationship. I told you, it's weird to hear about my mom getting down and dirty. I don't want to hear about old people hunching on each other. Ray shivered, overdramatically so. Ray Ann, go find something to do, Sage yelled, trying not to laugh. Go on. Get out of this shop. Take the car. Go get some lunch. Get out of my face. Ray grabbed her purse by the long strap, slung it across her body, and marched out of the door, cackling all the way. When the laughter inside the shop died down, Sage sighed, wiping tears under each eye. That girl is a trip and a half, said Yvonne. But now that she's gone, we can talk about your man. Now, Bennett was in here a few weeks ago, working on a couple of the dryers. I admit I had my eye on him, but he was really quiet. She was about to bake the dryers again, so he'd have to come back, said Tamara, blow dryer in one hand, round brush in the other. She flipped the dryer on low and pulled the brush through her client's hair at the nape, resulting in soft, silky strands. Should have gone over to Rooster's. He can be quiet, I guess. He's a thinker. But if you get him started, like ask him about something to do with electronics, he'll talk your ear off. That is not what I want him to talk off, Sage, but I'll be respectful since he's your man and all. Tamara pointed the nose of her blow dryer across the room. Yvonne, I'm about to kick you out of this shop. Behave. A lady doesn't kiss and tell, said Sage. Her hair had been rolled, and Yvonne was covering her head with a cap. The next step was to sit under a medium heat for half an hour. But between you, me, and the curling iron, he can talk some panties off, too. Miss Sage, you're a mess. Get on over to those dryers. Bennett. Bennett regretted saying he'd work the day. When he'd agreed to work New Year's Eve, he wasn't dating someone. Now, instead of being available to help Sage set up her coffee and hot chocolate station for the New Year's Eve block party and fireworks show, he was driving all over Potter Lake and Healy, making repairs on everything from washers and dryers to heat pumps, not to mention his Breville customer list, who'd all seem to break their espresso machines on the same day. At least he'd kept busy. It made the day go faster, bringing him closer to when he could clock out, head home, and get ready for the evening. Sage was coming and bringing Ray, who he'd finally met, for snacks and drinks. Then they had to head downtown for the holiday festivities. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and this time he wasn't sure who'd be calling. Sage made good use of his mobile number, and his children, mother and sister, still called as often as they always did. He pulled out the device and smiled at the display. Hi, Ladybug. Happy New Year almost. How you doing? Hi, Daddy. I'm good. Just checking on you. Rebecca's voice came through so clearly he could hear the exact vocal intonations that made her sound like her mother. Sometimes it made his heart sink. He longed to hear Virginia's voice again. Today, though, it brought a skip to his heartbeat and a lift to his mood. He was turning another corner. Another year. He was making it. I'm doing fine. Really this time, he added with a laugh. She'd know what he meant. Got a full day today. Everybody broke everything. Rebecca laughed, another sound that brought him joy and memories of Virginia. It's good that you're busy. Do you have plans tonight? Bennett told Rebecca and Albert about Sage a few days ago. They took it better than he thought they would, even asking a few questions about her. As long as you're happy, Dad, Albert had said. When he reassured them that he was, indeed, happy, they seemed happy for him. His mother had been overjoyed to hear that he'd gotten back out there and had met someone nice who understood what he was going through. Yeah, the town does a big deal every New Year's Eve. He paused, not knowing what to call Sage quite yet. Sage will be working a table, so I'm going to help her out and we'll watch the fireworks. Should be nice. Good, Dad, good. I'm happy you're not going to be sitting at home by yourself. Thanks for being concerned, Ladybug. Hey, love you, but I'm coming up on my next call. I don't want to be late. I'll talk to you and Albert soon, all right? He disconnected the call and slid the phone away, then hung a right into the parking lot of Bubble Up Laundromat. A dryer was on the fritz and the place was unusually busy, so he'd scheduled a last-minute service call to take a look. The scent of laundry detergent and bleach hit him in waves as he walked through the double doors to the front counter. Good afternoon. I'm Bennett Alexander from Alexander Repair. Here to check out a busted dryer. He flashed his ID badge and slid a business card across the counter to a young male clerk wearing a paper hat that read Happy New Year. Oh yeah, it's the one over in the corner on the left. People love that one because it's bigger than the others. Last night there was actually a line to use it. Okay, and what's it doing? Or not doing? It's taking forever to dry anything. I checked the lint filter. Nothing seems to be wrong with it, but it's not heating up. There's nothing like warm, wet underwear. You know what I mean? Bennett laughed, hitched up his tool belt, and headed to the broken dryer. A half hour and a repair to a loose heating coil later, the dryer was up and running, pumping out hot air. Thank you so much, the clerk beamed. Having all your appliances working must be so satisfying. My regulars will be so happy. Happy New Year to you, Bennett said, handing him the invoice. Give me a call if anything else goes wrong. This is due in 10 days. No problem, Bennett. Happy New Year to you. After giving the clerk and the patrons a nod, Bennett left the shop and heaved a sigh of relief. He peeled off his zip-up hoodie with the Alexander Repair logo on it. He was officially finished with calls. He had plans with his lady for the evening, and he was about to walk into a new year the happiest he'd been in a long time. 2 hot chocolates, large, Sage called over her shoulder. Behind her, Ray and Bennett were working the line. This was the second year that Sage was in charge of the hot beverage station, and her popularity, Bennett had heard, had grown exponentially. The line, which had been long all evening, was beginning to thin out since the fireworks were starting soon. And now they were serving none other than Mayor Kate Kavanaugh and his wife Leslie. She balanced a tiny replica of Casey on her hip. Bleary-eyed but happy, Kate Jr. gave Sage a big smile and babbled something in baby language. Happy New Year to y'all, Bennett said, handing them each a tall hot chocolate garnished with whipped cream. Happy New Year, Casey replied, his hands out. He and Bennett performed the complicated handshake that had been developed at the barber shop, a series of taps and twists and grips. I don't know who made up that silly handshake, but they need to retire it, Leslie said. They take all day to shake hands, Sage teased, grinning at Leslie and making faces at KJ. He responded with gusts of laughter. He's delirious. He took a long nap, but this is way past his bedtime. Leslie jostled him on her hip. Then Casey took him and set him up on his shoulder. The fireworks are about to start, so you can shut down any time. Looks like you're my last customers, so we'll go ahead and close up. Okay. Thank you for doing this again, Sage. We appreciate it. Anything for the mayor and his wife. Y'all get that baby in the bed. Will do. See you at Rooster's tomorrow, I'm sure. Leslie waved, then jogged to catch up with her husband and son. Sage watched them walk away, her arms folded across her chest. Bennett heard her sigh. He slung an arm over her shoulders, then squeezed her to him. You good? Sage tipped her face up to him. Yeah, I'm good. Why? Heard that sigh. Just checking. Oh, it was a happy sigh. She turned into him and wrapped her arms around his waist. He closed the circle around her with his other arm, pulling her up against him. He dipped his head, resting his forehead on hers. You good? She asked. Baby, I'm not just good. I'm great. Thankful for you and that broken espresso machine. Let's go watch the mayor try not to set this town on fire and get our New Year's Eve midnight kissing on. Think I could get a preview? Ooh, let me get ghost before the smooching starts, Ray drawled from behind them. She smiled at the sight of them, wrapped around each other as she walked past them, following the crowd to the fireworks display. Good. She's gone. Now I can kiss you like I want to. Are you getting fresh with me, Bennett Alexander? His lips met hers and lingered there for a few sweet moments before pulling back. They exchanged a long, meaningful gaze, and then a smile. I am most definitely getting fresh, Sage Owens. I hope to keep getting fresh with you all year long. Well, all right. Sage tipped her head up to him for another kiss. I'd best let you get to work. The end. I hope you've enjoyed this festive short. Happy holidays to you and yours, even though it's June. Still a holiday at some point in some time. The next selection I'll be reading is called The Kwanzaa Brunch. I will probably try to record that next week, uploading episodes starting on Wednesday. So look forward to that. Until then, I will talk to you all later. Thanks for tuning in.